Hello, guys. Welcome back to the Masterclass, the Manchester United Tactical Podcast, brought to you by Manscaped. I hope you had an absolutely fantastic Christmas. It is Boxing Day, my favorite day of the year because, Rob, it's just football day. I'm Haider Rubbani, joined by my co-host, as ever, Rob Blanchette. Manchester United have just drawn 2-2 against high-flying Leicester City. Unfortunately, we conceded a late goal to share the points. Rob, welcome back. Merry Christmas. What did you make of today's performance?
Merry Christmas to you, mate, and Merry Christmas to all our viewers and listeners across the world. I'm a bit disappointed in the end. I think Leicester are a very good team. They're going to be top 4 contenders, or at least top 6. I think United tried something a bit different today with the system, and we'll talk about all the intricacies and what Ole was trying to do in the match. But I think when you're in control in the final 10 minutes of a game like that, where you've had to kind of manage the scenarios that are in front of you, you really want to win the game. So I think we're a bit disappointed. Both Leicester goals were very much preventable for different reasons, and we'll get into that today. But overall, a point against a contender for the top 4 is not a bad result. But in retrospect, looking back, Manchester United should have won this game.
I agree. Guys, get your comments in, please. We want a lot of interaction today. We want to know your thoughts. Do you think it was 2 points dropped or a point gained? Only time will tell. We're going to start, Rob, talking about the formation setup. So talk to me a little bit about your thoughts over here about the setup, and do you think Ole got it spot on?
I think he did get it spot on today, and there was 2 variations to the system that are different to what we normally see with Manchester United. So as you can see on the screen here from Who Scored, it looks like a 4-2-3-1. And obviously Ole plays 4-2-3-1 all the time. We know he goes back to that system. But today wasn't a traditional Manchester United 4-2-3-1. Why was that? Well, it was mainly to do with the position of Lindelof and Luke Shaw. So looking at it here on the right-hand side, Lindelof there looks like he's playing right back, and there were very much times where he was on the right-hand side of the defence. But it was essentially a back 3 that was shifted to the right-hand side to clog up the channels, to go and do a job on Harvey Barnes and to stop Jamie Vardy finding space in the channel to run. And it worked. Overall, Leicester couldn't really exploit that. And after half an hour, you found that they changed their formation and their shape a little bit just to address that. And you saw Luke Shaw as well was pushing forward into what was a left-hand side of midfield role and allowing Fred to drop in almost as a centre-back at times, out of possession when Manchester United was starting their ball attacks. It was interesting. It was different. And it was something that Ole, I think, could employ more in weeks to come, because the shape did suit the players that he put out there today. And it's a little bit different to maybe the standard flat 4-2-3-1 that we do see, where you're really relying on counter-attack, or you're relying on maybe the 3 behind the striker to do all the creativity. There was a bit more fluidity through the team today. Like the second goal for Manchester United actually starts from Eric Bailly. It doesn't start from Cavani, which is where people will think it did. It came because Bailly stepped out with the ball and played it into Cavani. So we're going to look at all of these things today, break down the main parts of it, because I think we could be here for 2 hours, but we're not going to do that. We're going to come in under an hour, because that's what people want from a podcast. And we're going to talk about the main parts of Manchester United's game today.
I completely agree. Rob, let's read out some of the comments from our fantastic listeners. So Masood is saying here, frustrating result. I think there's a lot of that sort of feeling. Ahmed is saying as well, I think it's 2 points dropped, but I think it's a fair point for both sides, having watched the game. I think, Rob, for the neutral, it was a pretty exciting game. I thought tactically it was intriguing, and I thought that both sides were pretty equal. Ben's got a comment over here. Thought United edged the game, but a couple of lapses in concentration cost us. Spot on. It's nothing new, but it showed why we're not going to push for the title this season. I think that's a fantastic comment. And Yehuda saying we missed an opportunity today. Rob, let's talk about Lindelof a little bit more, because there was a lot of surprise to see him playing at right back, but he didn't play like a traditional right back, did he? When you look at the way that Ole wants his right backs to play, usually you look at Wan-Bissaka, they're asked to go forward, but the key today was really to shut the supply to Vardy, because we all know with Jamie Vardy, with his pace, he can cause a lot of problems. So what did United do well? What did that back 3/4, obviously when Shaw came back, what did they do well today?
Well, let's look also here at the Leicester system that we've got up on the screen at the moment for everyone watching live. You can see there that Harvey Barnes plays to the left-hand side of an attacking midfield. United's idea today defensively was to stop Harvey Barnes getting any joy on that left-hand side, and he didn't. When he scored his goal in the first half, it all comes about from what's effectively a poor mistake from Bruno Fernandes, and the ball breaks to Barnes centrally. He can bring it onto his left-hand side. He shoots and he scores. And really, David De Gea, I don't think will be very pleased with his own position in there, because if he's in the centre of the goal, he probably saves it. Overall, Lindelof was on that right-hand side today. As I said, a back three that shifted maybe one position to the right. So you saw Bailly effectively acting as a centre-back on his own at times. Maguire was spreading it, coming to the left as a left-back at times. But Lindelof's main job today on that right-hand side was not to push forward like Aaron Wan-Bissaka would do. You know, Wan-Bissaka was injured today, and that's why Lindelof played. But Lindelof, much more than Aaron Wan-Bissaka, is very good at looking after that space that's inside. Why? Because he's a centre-back. He knows what that space means. He knows what he has to do there. So Harvey Barnes didn't really get any joy off that left-hand side, even though that's what Leicester were trying to do. They were trying to play through him, through Maddison. And overall, Manchester United's shape negated that. And as I said, after 30 minutes, you saw really with Brendan Rodgers made 2 or 3 little tweaks to the attack just to try and join the dots a little bit more, to give Vardy a little bit more support around there. And, you know, Vardy scores the goal today. Obviously, it was a deflection, but he got nothing in the game at all. So I think Ole will look at the game plan that he put out today and feel that it was a success. But there were 2 key errors for the goals. Bruno Fernandes gives the ball away in what is a bad area. You can give it away on the halfway line, but don't give it away 20 yards from your own box like that. Don't dilly-dally. And for the second goal, Paul Pogba has to do a lot more for me. He gets caught on the wrong side. You know, you're trying to see the game out. Get the right side of your man. Doesn't matter if you're one of the 3 going forward. Get the right side. We always talk about being goal side in football. And in the second wave, when they're in the box, you've got to do a little bit more as well. And Pogba's got to drop deep and help. And he doesn't. So those 2 mistakes by, you know, attacking midfielders, you could say, were really the key to the result at the end of the day. But overall, shape was really good. You know, if we win this game 2-1, we would be sat here now saying that it was a bit of a masterclass from Ole, how he set up. He tried something a little bit different and it worked. But just at the end of the day, Manchester United couldn't see the result through. Something we have seen from this Manchester United team before, where they can't quite get over the line when they're actually in front.
I agree, Rob. We've got some comments here from Orwa. He's saying, for me, it was Maguire and McTominay as well as Bruno who was at fault for the goal. Let's talk about that goal, Rob, because I think I agree with you. It starts with Bruno, but it's a sequence of errors for me, and I tweeted that during the game. You had Maguire's clearance, which was poor, but from Bruno in that position, you cannot be trying to nutmeg a player. That's crazy. You shouldn't be doing that. Not looking after the ball. And then, obviously, it goes to Barnes, and I felt like McTominay and Bailly should have closed the player down quicker, but it's a great finish. And then some people think it's De Gea's fault as well on the line. I don't really think so, but it's a sequence of errors. And this is not the first time we're seeing this. And today, both goals came from errors, didn't they? And that's a frustrating thing, because on the whole, I think, yeah, you could say it was a fair result, but Manchester United created enough to win. And if it weren't for those 2 mistakes, I don't think Leicester did anything excellent today or out of the ordinary. Man United would be sitting here with 2 more points and we'd be second in the league.
Okay, let's hyper-analyze the goals a little bit more as we've got the kind of focus on this. Yep, the first point, Maguire makes a tiny mistake, but he does move the ball out. So he doesn't lose the ball in that scenario. When the ball comes to Bruno, obviously being a creative player, wants to kind of nutmeg the player in front of him, set the attack off. But when you're that close to your box, you've got to be safe. You've either got to hold the ball for a few more seconds so someone can come into play and help you, or you've got to take the ball wider into a less dangerous area. And what he did was he tried to be clever, nutmeg the Leicester player, and that's where the goal comes from. Now, let's look at this in terms of real-world logistics, like we're on the football pitch playing this game. If you're Scott McTominay and that ball comes to you and it comes to Harvey Barnes 25 yards, 30 yards from goal, your first thought is, what is my job? That's very easy to say that Bruno Fernandes has made a big mess and my job is to go and clean up his mess. But that's not how footballers work generally, not in that position. Your first thought is, what do I do? And his first job is, I have to look after the space around me. I'm in the pivot in this position. Eric Bailly is a centre-back. And you're there as your job is to kind of stop the shot coming in. Now, in hindsight, Scott McTominay will be saying, yeah, maybe I should have closed him down. But it's not a mistake. I'm not selling it as a mistake. There's no way I'm sat here thinking it's those two players' fault. When Harvey Barnes gets the ball on the edge of the box, you want people in the way of the shot. And they were. But Barnes gets it to the left and he cracks one. And De Gea needs to shuffle across to the right and he needs to get closer to his post to close that down. So I wouldn't say it's what we've seen with United in recent weeks where you may get 4 or 5 errors in one go. The error is Bruno's. And then there's kind of 50-50s along the way, all the way across. I don't blame Maguire. He did a little slip, but he got the ball out. He didn't give the ball away. I don't blame McTominay because he can't be expected to clean up every mess of the player in front of him. And I think Eric Bailly was playing at the centre-back position at that point. You want him to stay rooted to stop the shot in case it goes centre to protect the goalkeeper. It's Bruno's fault. That's whose fault it is. You know, we love him and he did well today. He got a really good assist, which again, I don't think he got much praise for on the TV where they were saying, oh, you know, it was kind of a mistake. He got his studs on the ball. I think he actually means that. And obviously the finish is fantastic when he's playing as a false nine. So you will get that with Bruno Fernandes with that kind of play. But he needs to be more assured himself there that he doesn't give the ball away where he's then selling his team down the river. And people are saying, oh, why did McTominay not close the player down? Hey, what? If I'm Scott McTominay, I'm thinking I'm doing my job. You know, I'm in the correct position. Yeah, if I'm going to come out to protect, then I've got to really dash out and do that. But what happens if someone slides that ball through my legs into Vardy? Vardy's running in behind me, but I can't see him. That's what I'm thinking. That's real world football. And you have to think about those things. We'll talk about the second goal a little bit more on after that. But it was that was really the only mistake that United made in the first half, even though Leicester, I think, maybe edged it in terms of some of their quality. But that was frustrating to give that goal away because it put United in a bad position when they shouldn't have been.
Absolutely, Rob. I think that's pretty spot on. When Bruno does something fantastically well, we praise him. And when he makes a mistake, you have to call it out as well. You've got to be fair to everyone. And that's the key here. You know, Bruno can affect the game in a positive way, but also he did it in a negative way today as well. Rob, let's talk more about Luke Shaw's pressing, because as we've said already, the 3 centre-backs had to deal with the channel, and they did that really well today. I didn't really see Vardy very much. Maddison was pretty anonymous. Barnes scored a brilliant goal. But what was the significance of Shaw doing that? Because I thought he had a good game today. I thought he looked, he looked sharp. He worked hard. He didn't really give them much of a sniff down our left-hand side flank. Is this a tactical thing that Ollie's just done just for one game, do you think? Or is this something we could see a little bit more with sides that have, a lot of threat, sort of in the channels?
I think we'll see it more as the season unfolds because it plays into Tellers' hands. Tellers can play this system much more successfully than playing effectively a flat back 4 in a 4-2-3-1 because Tellers isn't really good on the inside or what's behind him. He's a progressive fullback. So what we saw today with Luke Shaw was not being an out-and-out progressive wing back or anything like that, but he was allowed to go and press the midfielder on the right-hand side. And the way United negated maybe the problems that could come with that was by letting Fred drop really deep. So when United were rolling the ball out from De Gea to a centre-back, Fred was coming right back in to kind of make an extra 3. It was allowing Lindelof to go wider, and Lindelof wasn't pushing forward, to go and mark Barnes. What you found at that point was that Luke Shaw was going much higher up the field towards the halfway line. So he was stretching that play. Now that makes it really hard for Vardy because Vardy doesn't know who he needs to go and address because he's got 3 players there and he really wants 2 centre-backs to address. So in a 4, you go and address one of the centre-backs. Very easy as a striker. When there's 3 players there, or effectively a 5, because you've got Lindelof to the far right and you've got Luke Shaw pushing forward, incredibly hard to press the ball. And I think Leicester didn't have the usual success in that today. They're normally really good, really busy at pressing the ball from the front. And today you see it looked a little bit lopsided, and it was because of what Manchester United were doing. So I liked what Luke Shaw did today. I don't need him to be a flying left wing back. I think in that system, you just need him to join up the midfield and then hope that Fred and McTominay, who are both deeper as well, can give you a little bit more ball retention. Did they do that? Probably not. That's an issue. And I think that's why Pogba came onto the field with half an hour to go. Didn't surprise me that Dan James was sacrificed for that. Dan James is another player we need to talk about, because I think on the right-hand side of where he was playing, his role really was to kind of be that wing back. He was the guy who was supposed to come back, help with Harvey Barnes, but then really sprint forward. And you could see the first 10 minutes, he looked like a duck out of water. He didn't know what he was doing. The space was behind him. Then when the ball was in front of him, he didn't know whether to go and press. And he was just a little bit like, do I go? Do I stay? Do I go more back? Do I get close to Lindelof? Do I go further away from Lindelof? And it looked a bit misshapen for about 10 or 15 minutes. But credit to him, he did kind of work through it. But it was the right time to sacrifice him. But when Pogba came in and it became more of a traditional 4-2-3-1, there was 5 minutes where Pogba went and played as the 10 or as the false 9. And Bruno went to the left-hand side. And in that 5 minutes, United nearly got punished 2 or 3 times because it just looked really lopsided. That was the only part of the game where I felt really critical of Ole, because that's obviously something that's come from the manager to say, right, let's try this. But to his credit, he changed it very, very quickly. And United had chances to win it. I think Cavani coming on was the right substitution. Great little ball, obviously, for Bruno, that join-up play. It's exactly what you want from a forward. United nearly got it right today. Tactically, I think they got it there, 90%. But that 10% is always about what players do in your system. And Pogba, for the second goal, he's got to stay goal side. It's one of those things that you teach all the time in training with kids. You talk to them about staying goal side, because then you're protecting what's behind you. And when you're in that position, you're winning with a few minutes to go. You've got to protect. Doesn't matter who you are. You could be Paul Pogba, Scott McTominay, or a player who's defensively minded or a player who's offensively minded. At that moment, you must protect and help your team. And Pogba didn't, unfortunately.
Yeah, I agree with that. Rob, I want to sort of push into talking about Dan James, because you've touched on him already. And I think he gets a lot of stick. Now, he's come into the side and he's playing a position that he's not familiar playing with, as you've mentioned already. He's having to do a job which is not what he usually does. And to be honest, I don't see what he did so terribly wrong today. You're seeing a lot of awful footballer. After last week, he had a good performance. Yes, he's not a top footballer. We all know that. But the overreaction and hysteria from last week, he was fantastic, to this week, now he shouldn't even be anywhere near the side. Ollie's got it wrong. Consider all things considered, I think he did a pretty good job on that right-hand side. Yes, he didn't show enough going forward, but and I want to touch on the United's front three. His pass accuracy was in the 60s. Martial's was 50%, Rashford's 79%, and Bruno's was in the 60s as well. So putting all of that together, United, I think they handled the turnover of possession pretty well and well enough. But I think it was slow either to get the ball up to the front three. And the other problem was when the front three got the ball, they weren't getting it in space. They were getting it with a man behind them, so they were losing the ball. So all those things considered, the front three, essentially, what more could they have done?
Well, you don't play Dan James because he's a ball player. That's not what he's in the team for. Why do you play Dan James? It's because he's quick. So you play him because he's quick. Now, we know he's not a fullback either. He's not a wing back, but he can go and offer a bit of protection. I think Ole said last year that Dan James is the best defensive wide player that he's got in his attack. So you can see why he's leaning towards Dan James. Now, we've heard plenty in the last few weeks that Dan's been training really well, that he looks like he's taken a step forward. So Ole is trusting him. And as I've said in last week's podcast, it's really important that if a manager sees that a player is playing well in training, that there is some translation into a path into the first team. Because otherwise, players just think, well, I'm not going to get picked, so what's the point in training? Or sell me, get rid of me. January's coming, please just move me on. So I think with Dan James, he's not the answer to that position forevermore. but he's in the development stage of his career. And did he let anyone down today? No. As I said, in the first 10 minutes, I think he was struggling with the tactical job of what he had to do. And that was coming back to fill the space to protect Lindelof, but then on the front foot being very aggressive and very positive. And you could see he was struggling with that mentally. He didn't quite know what to do. He didn't want to leave the space behind. But 2 or 3 times the ball was coming from the Leicester back line and they were just chipping the ball over the top of him and they were in straight away. And then Lindelof's exposed and Lindelof's like, ugh. And to Lindelof's credit, he played that role well. He didn't overcommit himself. He didn't leave the space. What we see with Aaron Wan-Bissaka, is that he vacates the space inside and he lets the runner go, and then United are in trouble. So United dealt with that tactically today. And I think with Dan James, we've got to give him time. Like, as I always say, if you don't want a player in your squad or you don't choose to use him, then get rid of him, sell him. And United fans have to understand that. You might not like him, but if he's in the squad, he's an option. And I think he was a good option today, and I think after an hour, the right thing to do was to try and get some more ball possession. The right thing to do was to go and chase the win and look for a second goal. United got that second goal, but couldn't hold on. And in that moment, as I said, for the second Leicester goal, you need your midfield just to sit a little bit deeper, have a little bit more of a low block in the last 10 minutes, be a little bit more disciplined. You're winning the game. Don't make a mistake. United made a mistake. Is that Dan James's fault? Absolutely not. It's not worth moaning about Dan James today.
I'd agree with that, Rob. I'm going to read out some comments regarding Dan James. So Ben's got one over here. James is a new Lingard for scapegoatery. He did have a rubbish second half, but he was taken off, though. And Jonathan's saying here, I like Dan James. He's a young player still learning and developing. The fan base is just toxicity now. I think eventually he'll be a good squad player. Rob, it's that neurosity that we talk about a lot, isn't it? That, there's always got to be one player that's going to be the target of all the abuse. And I don't think Dan James is particularly bad today. I don't think anyone was bad today, Rob, if I'm honest. He played a good side, a very good side, who are very well drilled. They've got some fantastic attacking players. James Maddison hardly has a sniff. Is it 2 points dropped? It feels like it right now, but I think maybe we'll see in a couple of weeks' time, where is this going to be a good 1 point or is it going to be a 2 points drop? We'll see that when more results come. But I'm going to read out a question here, Rob, because it does link to what we are talking about regarding the fullbacks. Now, I think United have got a problem at right back. There's a comment in the comment section which is saying that it looks like Lindelof is out till mid-January. Now, that's pretty big, Rob. That's United looking probably to have to buy centre-back, or they're going to have to do something. But the right-back position, we've talked about it a lot. This week, we're not talking about Wan-Bissaka because he didn't play. But it is a problem position for United. Maybe as much of a problem position as the right wing. Now, Ben's asking, is this a setup today, the solution to United's lack of width from the fullbacks? The wide attackers weren't getting into the same positions as the fullback for once. We've seen that a lot, haven't we, Rob, where, for example, Rashford will hug the touchline and it makes it difficult for Telles or Shaw to make those overlapping runs. United need to find the right combination at fullback, don't they, going forward? And I think personally that Tuanzebe showed the other night against Everton that he's a viable option there. Would you like to see Oli do that a little bit more?
There's no doubt that if United want to play this system going forward, and I think they will play it in the weeks to come and the months to come, that if Lindelof is out for any extended period, that Tuanzebe can do that job. No doubt about it. Tuanzebe, in some ways, is much more suited to doing that job than Lindelof. Now, Lindelof's played the right side of, maybe you could say, a narrow back 4 or 3, or however you want to present it, for his country before, which is why he played that today in that system. And he did okay. He did the job. I don't think when he went off that anyone was kind of moaning about Victor Lindelof. But Tuanzebe is probably built for that role a bit more. Why? Because he can do some traditional right-back things. He can bomb forward. He's good with the ball at his feet. He's positionally quite tight. But he's also got recovery. So if something goes in behind him, he can kind of do what Aaron does, in the sense that he can turn, face the ball and run backwards. Now, people might think again that that's a simple thing to do, but when you're caught on your heels, it is quite difficult. You've got to be mentally driven to be ready to do that. So I think that Axel can do that. In the short term, I don't think that means Manchester United suddenly go out and buy a fullback in the transfer window. You're not going to get your primary targets this time of year. It's just not happening. If there's someone that comes up that maybe fits the bill, like, someone you put your hand over your mouth and you talk about Alaba and players like this, and there might be opportunities with, top class defenders who can do multiple things, then great, you go and get them, you try and get them. But it's not reality. It doesn't generally happen. And I still think that if you want to go and buy a right back, you need to go and get someone that does different things to Wan-Bissaka. So you need someone who's progressively very good on the right-hand side, who's a right wing back, a mirror of what Telles does on the left, because that gives you options. That means you've got 4 fullbacks that can do those things. Now, we know that Ethan Laird can possibly do that. We know that kind of Brandon can do certain things on that side. There is options, but it's also about experience and tactical knowledge and feeling happy with putting that 11 out every week and feeling that they can do what you've told them to do in training all of that week before. And I think that's kind of the bigger question for Ole. I think fullback is still something that United need to address, and they might not be able to address it till the summer. So I don't think fans should get too excited about that. But I do think that if you kind of want to play the system in the next 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 games, you've got Tuanzebe. You might even rope Mengi into one of these roles eventually. I'm hot on Mengi, and find him some minutes. But Tuanzebe, for me, he's unlucky with this goal today. It was a deflection. And I actually think for the small spell that he was on for 20, 30 minutes, whatever it was, he did quite well. So, no problems there at all with what Axel does on the pitch.
Another thing about Axel, Rob, I do want to add is that he's very good on the ball. He's technically a good player. And that shows in comparison to Wan-Bissaka. I think Wan-Bissaka looks a little bit more uncomfortable on the ball, but Axel looks comfortable. He also can press higher, and he also seems more comfortable taking up those higher positions. I'm going to read out a comment from Reese here, Rob. The fullback's job is to be both an offensive and defensive threat. My issue is Telles can only attack, something we say a lot, don't we, Rob? Mm-hmm. He defensively, he's not that good, but offensively, he's brilliant. I think we've got a nice little combination on the left-hand side. If we want to play a bit more defensively like we did against City, then Luke Shaw's the right choice. If we're going to go and play a Sheffield United, Telles is a better one if we're going to have most of the ball. But Rob, I do want to talk now about Paul Pogba, because for me, as soon as Paul Pogba came on, that changed it for United in the sense where I think Leicester dropped back a little bit more. We started keeping the ball better. This is something I think we see a lot, which maybe fans don't necessarily realize when Pogba plays, that Pogba has his simple presence being on the pitch, the quality that he has, he can scare oppositions. And I thought that United were much more, maybe more attacking, and they look more calmer on the ball. They're creating more chances. But one thing I did notice is that when Pogba did come on, he went centrally and Bruno shifted out to the left. Now, that did change again when Cavani came on. But let's talk a little bit about that little tactical change. What did you like about Pogba playing as the number 10? Because for me, it gets him on the ball, playing higher up the pitch. But you do lose that off-the-ball work that Bruno has in spades.
Yeah, I hated it. Absolutely hated it. I know everyone wants to see Pogba play as a 10. But the way United were playing today, they were playing with a false 9. Now, there is a difference. That's why we call them different names. We don't call it a number 10. We call it a false 9 because that's what the role is in this system. Can Paul Pogba play as a false 9? Well, in theory, yes. But what do I want my false 9 to do in the first instance? I want him to press with energy. Does Paul Pogba press with energy? Not really. So Ole did that because he was trying to outsmart what Leicester did when they made the change. You're totally right with what you say. When Pogba came onto the pitch, there was a bit of fear there for 5 minutes where Leicester were trying to reorganise. And Ole tried to counter that by moving Bruno up deeper and moving Pogba higher up the pitch. But what you saw then is that Leicester settled on the ball from the back because they were like, oh, no one's pressing us now. Lovely. This is what we would like. And what did Ole do 5 minutes later? He changed it. He let Pogba go back to the left-hand side. They effectively went 4-2-3-1 more effectively. Bruno went back to being a false 9. It's really, really important to look at the role that Bruno does in the team and why it is integral to how United play. So what is a difference between a false 9, a 10, and say maybe a trequarista, which I've talked about in the past? The real difference is that if you are a false 9, you are the Firmino man. That's what Liverpool play with. They let Firmino go and do that work centrally, and they say to him, you don't have to be Sergio Aguero. You don't have to be my best finisher in the world. You don't have to be Haaland. What we want you to do is go and do the work in that space where maybe the number 10 would vacate it, where maybe a trequarista would go roaming, but we need you to go and press. When you're playing that system, all well and good, that's fine. But Bruno needs to go and press. That's what's the first most important thing to do. Pogba Not that he can't do it, but it's just not natural to him. And you could see that when they set up in that 4-2-3-1 with Pogba at the top, that three was very flat. And you could kind of see they didn't really know what they were doing. The two wider players then were kind of going, wait, hang on, do we go before Paul or do we back Paul up and tell Paul to push on? But when you're having to work those things out, you can't do that in a game in the Premier League because you get punished. They pass through you, then they're through onto your back four and you get stuffed. That's kind of how it works. So you have to do something that's more natural. When Bruno went back to playing that role, what happened? Cavani drops into the pocket, picks up a really nice pass from Bailly, which I thought was a fantastic ball from centre-back. Cavani turns, little run, plays it through the channel. Bruno breaks the channel. Bruno's in the box. Bruno finishes. It's as simple as that. That comes about playing that role of being a false nine to perfection. Can Paul Pogba do that? Does Paul Pogba score goals like that? I don't think I've ever seen him in his career break that little channel and slot it away. It's not what he does. He's a creative, but let him create a little bit further back. That's really what he likes to do. I think he's better playing in a three on the left-hand side of an attack where he's got space to operate and where he can kind of do his best work.
I agree, Rob. And also for me, I prefer Pogba deeper. I actually, if you're going to go and play a 4-2-3-1, you want Bruno further forward. And I'm quite happy with Pogba sitting in the double pivot. But also going to Bruno, 31 goals and assists in 28 Premier League games. That's mind-blowingly good, isn't it? That's what classes. Absolutely outrageous. I mean, that's from midfield as well. We're not talking about strikers. It's absolutely fantastic. Rob, we're going to take some questions. But before I do that, let's just talk about United's finishing. Now, Jamie Vardy gets one chance and he scores. A little bit lucky, deflects off to Nzebi, but United's lack of clinical finishing, for me, is what cost us today. We created, it could have been about 5-2. We created more than enough good chances. Rashford early on was a shocking miss, and that's ultimately cost United a little bit. And then you have the one later on where Schmeichel saved it. Wasn't a good save. It was a poor finish. United, look, attacking wise, they need to be a lot more clinical. And until we do that, we won't be able to go to the next level and challenge, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's one of those strange ones we talk about the word clinical. Because if you score goals, everyone says that you're clinical. And if you miss chances, they say you're not. And again, it becomes a binary thing. Now, let's take Rashford, for example. Now, we've talked a lot about Marcus Rashford's shoulder injury. And we said last week when he was making his runs off the ball that he looked like he was fitter again, that the shoulder wasn't a problem. And I think today the shoulder looked like it was an issue again. Now, how do we know this? You could see that again in his press that he wasn't really kind of committed to his press like he can be. Is it because it's the day after Christmas? Who knows? It's one of those funny things. Boxing Day is always can be a tiring day for footballers. I remember seeing Manchester United get walloped 4-0 at Old Trafford on Boxing Day by QPR. It wasn't a very nice experience when I was a kid. It looked like nobody could run that day. I think today when you looked at Marcus, he gets that chance earlier on with the header, doesn't he? And he just doesn't execute. Now you can say, Marcus, you need to be clinical in that moment. And he wasn't. And he flicks his head at it and he doesn't even hit the target. But then, of course, minutes later, he gets the ball to feet. He slots in the bottom corner and we feel good again. Now, towards later on in the game, I don't know if you saw Harvey Barnes pulled Rashford's arm. Did you see that at all with 20 minutes to go?
Yeah, he went down in agony, didn't he?
He pulled his arm, which is...
Yeah.
It was a nothing thing. He pulled his arm and Rashford fell to the floor and was holding his shoulder. So that tells you that Marcus Rashford's still having a problem with that shoulder. It's not healed. And that means that Marcus Rashford might not be as clinical as we want him to be. Now, Martial did get a chance, got through, was offside, slotted his chance away very nicely, didn't he? So we can't say he's not clinical because he hit the target and scored, but he's offside. I think it's a much bigger question for Manchester United's attack and how we play. And the sense that this United's attack is built around Bruno Fernandes with all the kind of bit part players doing their parts in the system. So Rashford and Martial have to do their kind of roles or what they've been trained to do in the last 12 months or so. And that's fine. Do they need to become better finishers? Yes, I think we can kind of all agree on that. But I don't think it's as simple as just saying, be more clinical. It would help maybe if United had a clinical entity in the attack somewhere, like a Haaland that you could lean on. But they've got Cavani for that this season. But Cavani himself is not always that clinical. He gets chances, but he does miss chances. That means that he's not that clinical, even though he scored, a zillion goals in like 200 or 300 appearances going back for PSG. So that's why I'm saying the word clinical isn't necessarily what you always need. You just need to make sure the system works so you can go and beat teams. Beating teams is what it's about. So if you score once or 4 or 10, it doesn't really matter. It's getting 3 points. That's what matters. And in today's situation for United, if they defend 2 goals a little bit better, keep the ball a little bit better, stay goal side a little bit better, really basic stuff, they win. And that's really the difference, I think, between having an effective attack and maybe one that doesn't hit the target enough. Under Jose, United used to have 1 or 2 shots on target per game. And that, of course, is nowhere near good enough because it's squeezing the margins too much where you're hoping that one shot goes in. United create a lot. United, if you have 20 chances, you're not going to score 17 goals, are you? The whole point is that you only put 2 or 3 of those 20 chances away. And that would be a conversion rate of about, 6%, 10%. Your conversion rate doesn't have to be huge. What you have to do is create. And I think United are getting better at that, but it's not quite there yet. That goal was a great goal from Bailly to Cavani and to Bruno's finish. I felt really high on that because I thought that's the kind of goal we don't see from United, cutting people through the middle with creativity. We're always relying on pace, not skill. And that was a really good moment. I hope to see more of that in the weeks ahead. And I want to see Bruno carry on as the false 9. I don't want to see Pogba up there. I don't want to see anyone else doing that job. People might say Donny can do it, and he can. But Donny doesn't make that run either. Donny doesn't make the kind of run that Bruno does in that channel. Donny's more of a kind of late runner rather than making the early positive run like a striker.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And Mons Money's got a comment here. RXG was 2.2 to their 0.8, I believe. So I think defending and silly errors let us down. Absolutely. 100%. And we're going to take some questions now. Usman's got a question here. Thank you for your question, mate. Do you guys think Maguire should be communicating and organising better, seeing as he is our captain? You go first, Rob.
Yeah, I've said in previous podcasts that I think Maguire needs to keep talking. But one of the things that you hear from Manchester United and from the camp when the players talk is that he is a guy who goes and does his talking into people's ears. So that's how he actually operates as a captain. That's why he's seen as a leader at Manchester United. Now, we can criticize his game and stuff that he does and how he kind of organizes on the pitch. I think one of the things, since we've had no fans in the ground, and a lot of my colleagues who are at games, is that they always say that the person they can hear from the stands is Harry Maguire. So there's a little bit of a misconception that he doesn't communicate or that he's completely mute and he doesn't talk to people. That's not really true. He's one of these people who kind of does do his organising. He just maybe he's not as expressive as a Roy Keane. You can't read his face of thunder where he's pointing and shouting and having a go at people. He's a little bit more poker face, but he does do talking. I think we might have stumbled on something here in terms of what you do with the Maguire-Lindelof axis, including Bailly. For me, I'm not that high on Bailly. I think he makes mistakes. But into this system that we saw today, it suits him because he's given a soulless responsibility to look after that channel. And you say to him, whatever goes through there, you just go, Eric. You look after that. And I think when he's in a 2 in a pair, he doesn't know whether to stick or twist. And that doesn't help United because it makes United look slow and cumbersome. But today, I think it worked really well. I think Maguire's comfortable being in the left channel. I think it gives him more opportunity to run out with the ball. And as a captain, yeah, great. We need to talk about leadership, but I'm more bothered about his football. I'm always bothered about people's football first. And I think in recent weeks, his football has been good. And in the pairings today, looking at how United set up, it suited him to have Luke Shaw much further to his left and advanced. It gave him an outlet pass that sometimes he doesn't have when United are playing more of a flat back 4. And he gets an exposed because if he loses the ball, what happens? He gets outrun, doesn't he? Because he's not quick. So Ole has to solve those issues on the training ground and find tactics that help his captain.
I agree. And on Eric Bailly, I think he played well today, Rob, but he's definitely not the long-term option. He is made of glass, as we know, but also he's very rash for me. He's either fantastic, there's 2 extremes, or he's making silly mistakes. But a lot of that comes down to the fact that he hasn't played enough and he hasn't developed. When he first came to United, he was a fantastic prospect. I mean, he was brilliant in that first season, but the injuries have accumulated. He's missed out on such important developmental time and game time. And that's something I do worry a little bit with Axel, that I think he needs to be playing a little bit more at this stage of his career. But let's go to the next question from Lakesh. Our priority for the January window. For me, Rob, I tweeted it right after the game, centre-back. You need to go get a centre-back. I love a defensive midfielder, but very unlikely you're going to get your top target. I think United need to go and find a quality centre-back and someone who has that recovery pace. If you're not going to play Axel, because I'm still a little bit stumped as to why Ollie's not playing Axel more.
It's tactical. That's why we do this podcast. You know, like if United could just go and pick a centre back up in January who solves all your problems, then great. But we just said 10 minutes ago, who do you go and get? Do you just go and knock on Leipzig's door and say, right, give us Upamecano now, please? They're not going to give us. It's
got to be him, really. That's the obvious option.
It's got to be him in an idealistic world, and we don't live in an idealistic world in football. So that's why the January transfer window is generally full of duds. It's players who need to be moved on, who need minutes, who kind of have got sick of sitting on benches. And Manchester United do not need that kind of role player at the moment. So like I said to you, if, for instance, Bayern Munich go, we don't like this situation with Alaba, it's time to move him on and get as much as we can get because his contract's about to disappear and we don't want to do this. And there is a chance that will happen because Bayern don't like the situation and what Alaba is demanding. Then you go and do it, execute that deal. But I think we have to put our grounding within reality, Haider. We really, really do. And I think with the January transfer window, one thing that Gary Neville said the other week, and I agree with it, is that if you cannot improve your squad, then you don't do any business in January. Manchester United have not got the money to take the cash out of the summer transfer window that's coming up at the end of the season to just spend it in January, splurge it, and maybe do some more pawn recruitment, which they have done in the past. So you look at what you've got. What have you got a centre-back at the moment? You've got Maguire, you've got Lindelof, who we've both said have played quite well this season. You've got Tuanzebe to still break his way into that kind of pairing. Bailly looks pretty healthy at the moment, but as we said, is kind of made of paper and could tear at any moment. And that gives you 4 centre-backs. If you're going to buy centre-back number 5, it's because you're going to move one of the other ones out. You've got Mengi as well to come into that system. So you're saying there, let's go and buy a centre-back, but that I just think it's a bit too Championship Manager. It makes sense on paper because you just want to improve positions, but it doesn't make sense in reality or in football terms that, when you're looking at the numbers, you kind of say to yourself, right, if I'm going to lose someone, if I'm going to sell Rojo and Jones and get rid of them in January, then maybe with their wage, I can tempt someone to come to the football club. But then it might be a journeyman. It might be you're looking at someone like, of a Johnny Evans stature to say, no, I just need some experience there. I don't think that's what United want at the moment. United would like to buy a primary centre-back going forward. They want to kind of find their Laporte, like when City went and did that business. But Upamecano, if I'm Upamecano, do I think that Manchester United is where I'm going next? I'm not sure. I think if I'm Upamecano, I'm thinking, buy me Liverpool. Buy me Man City. I want to go to your clubs at the moment because you're kind of more the finished article and I can take you over the top in the Champions League or take you over the top back in the Premier League. Is United the team I would go to at the moment? Not necessarily sure it would be. But I think for Manchester United's problems, we still have got maybe 1 or 2 other issues. And there might be the huge issue of Paul Pogba leaving the football club at the end of the season or even in January, but I think it's more likely next summer. And then your money must go on a midfielder. Doesn't matter whether you think centre-back's strong enough or not. You must go and buy a top midfielder who can go and fill that role and can actually sit in there, play a 6, play an 8, play different systems, and maybe give you something a little bit more focused than Pogba does give you. As I said, today was Pogba's problem, in terms of he just switched off in that moment, was caught goal side. Wasn't on goal side twice. United lose the game. It's a small mistake, but it's significant. They're the things that you need to go and work on in transfer markets. I'd love a new centre-back, but it's got to be the right centre-back. Unless you're going to go and get your Van Dijk, then I'm not interested. I'm not interested in centre-backs. Go and get me a centre-back that's world-class. But
So what do you want? Do you want a right-back? Because we've discussed the right-back. If there was a position, right-winger, Sancho, there's questions about Sancho. Do you think United should go back into him? Something that frustrates me, Rob, about the Sancho situation is that clearly, look, people need to remember players are human beings. He was He wanted the United move, as we discussed many times in the summer when you came on the podcast, and he didn't get that move. Mentally, that's taken a bit of a hit. He's not suddenly a rubbish player. He's not suddenly overrated. He's having a difficult season. Fans too quickly to jump on, poor performance and good performances. But should United be going back in there? Because there are a lot of reports saying United are still interested in Jadon Sancho. I know we've got Diallo coming in. He looks really exciting. Pelistri's still got to develop. I reckon he's about 6 months to a year away from being considered for the first team. So do United go back in for that position? Does he change the needle that much towards the gap between us and Liverpool?
Well, no, he doesn't. And that's part of the problem. So look at it this way. You're right. Fans will react. If they see poor performances, what they're going to do? They're going to get on Twitter. They're going to slam him. They're going to rip strips off him. That's normal. I think when you look at Jadon Sancho and his £108 million valuation, if he'd come to Manchester United with, say, the current form that he's in, the world would have burnt down by now. People would be going crazy about bringing him in. He might have only got 4 assists and maybe a goal here or there, and people would be like 108 million, and it would be the same situation that maybe Paul Pogba found himself in for the last 4 years. I do look at it like this: Manchester United is still interested in Jadon Sancho. I said that at the time, and I still believe that. That's what we're hearing. But I think that, say, Jadon Sancho doesn't have a very impactful season this year, and Dortmund are obviously under new management, and they're going to be trying different things going forward, and maybe different shapes or how they want to kind of set up. If you get to next summer and Jadon Sancho has had a significant dip in his form, what Manchester United going to do? They're going to say, we want the player, here's 80 million.
Yeah, cut the price.
So this is the game. This is the poker game that is the football transfer market. And this is how it works. And it does work specifically to how we're talking about. And if you get him for, say, 78 million, something like that, and you've just saved yourself 35 million or something around that mark, that's the difference between making your profit when it comes to end of year profits and revenues with the stock exchange and how you're setting up, and not making it. And that's really important. I know football fans don't think it is, but if you're Ed Woodward and you're the Glazers, these are owners that don't want to spend money out of their pocket. They don't want to be flash and rash. They'll spend money, and they have spent almost £1 billion in the last 8 years, crazy amount of money, but they've just bought badly. And I think they were worried about Jadon Sancho, that if they bought someone at the top end of their value like that it could be an issue if they don't get immediate returns. It probably was more clever to get Cavani for nothing and a bit of a wage, and say, have a year with us, have 2 years maybe, even if you're up to it, and then carry on the build. So the original question you asked me was, what position would I look at? I wouldn't look at the right side of the attack at the moment. Why? Because I think United have got Greenwood, they've got Diallo to come in, and they've got Pelistri. That's 3 players. You've got Juan Mata, that's 4 players. You could play Rashford on that side, that's 5 players. They've got players to do that role. Now, they might not be specialists. I've unfortunately just left out Dan James, who played today. He's a player that can play that role. He's not someone that I would start a lot, but he can play it. There are other positions that United need to look at. I think right back is something for me that could become potentially a problem, because I've gone a bit cold on Aaron Wan-Bissaka. When I've looked at his numbers and what he does and what we've talked about on the podcast, he gets done way too many times on the inside. He doesn't get done on the outside, but football isn't about the outside anymore. You don't have wingers who go on the touchline and go to the byline and swing the ball back in. It doesn't really work like that. You have players who come in the channel and exploit you on the inside. It's the blind side, because you can't see them. When you're faced up here and your marker and your player's gone inside there and you're looking here, you can't see what's happening there. And Wan-Bissaka has very, very little awareness of what is going on inside.
It's a massive problem, Rob. You can't just be good at slide tackling.
That's a problem. So I need someone that can allow Aaron to be a defender, but when United need to go and be progressive, I need someone who's going to overlap, get crosses in, and get assists. So I would like a right back. I think also that you might have to look to future-proof Manchester United, that if you really do know that Paul Pogba is leaving, and Manchester United will know where they are with the player, that you need to go and look to get a player that negates that issue. And that will be a huge issue for United. If you lose Pogba in the summer, you've got to go and find a ball player, if not 2. because Paul Pogba can do 7 different things that maybe United fans are not that keen on or don't really kind of buy into. But you need players in that position to then go and let Scott McTominay be Scott McTominay and let Fred go and be Fred. You know, you need to have someone that brings the best out of those players. They're the 2 positions I would address in the immediacy. Will they happen in January? Yeah, I've done 20 transfer windows now, Haider, in my job. Yeah, it doesn't work in January. January is a horrible time to do it.
I can only think of 3, Rob. Bruno Fernandes, and then Evra and Vidic came in, but they were really poor. Remember Evra's first game? He had an absolute shocker and obviously got pulled at half time. But usually in January, we signed Alexis Sanchez in January. So you can only think of 3 players really off the top of my head. Maybe you'll be able to think about a few more. But generally speaking, January isn't the best time to do business. But if United are in touching distance, Rob, and they need that extra injection, then I think it's logical to... There are some players available, but it's about money, isn't it, really, at the end of the day? How much do we have?
I'd add Louis Saha to that. Came in January and was really, really good. But you're right, Evra was junk for the first 6 months, and Vidic looked like he didn't know what the Premier League was and looked exposed and scared and didn't know how to play the position. Yet 6 months on, a year later, both of them look world class. So, you know, you have to be patient sometimes with players. And that's why January is a bad time to just integrate a player, because everything's been set out for months from your pre-season, even though Man United really didn't have one. But you've got players that know what they're doing. And that's why Tellers hasn't played games. You know, that's why Tuanzebe's not really played. He's been out of the picture with injury and with illness. So you drop him back in and he has to now learn the system almost like a new player. Now, he knows those players better than, say, Tellers does, but it's a similar problem. If you bring someone in January, it's someone that has to kind of hit the ground running, but you've also have to make concessions for them. So if you brought in a right back, they'd have to learn that, oh, what have I got inside me? I've got 2 centre backs who are quite slow. That means I can't start on the halfway line. I might have to start 15, 20 yards back, and that's not my game. So that's something that the scouting department at Manchester United have to assess, and that's something that Ole has to assess. And I think with Tellez, that was the crux. You know, the reason why they went for Tellez and not Reguilon, and I think, you know, when you look at Reguilon, it's not that he's not a good player, but because he's a little bit more of a kind of up and down player in terms of how he plays. And people say, oh, yeah, he might have been right for Man United. There was no way that deal was right for Man United in a sense, because if he has a good season, he's going back to Real Madrid. It's just as simple as that. So, you know, Tellez gives you maybe 3 or 4 years in that position and allows you to carry on your build at left back. And then you might just say to Luke Shaw, right, if you're not doing it, if you're not the player that I feel who can take United forward, then I'll go and buy another left back in time. You know, Dalot is starting games at AC Milan. Do I see Dalot coming back at playing right back for Man United? No. Why? Because the Premier League is a different animal to Serie A. So, you know, the options for United still look a little bit thin at right back. I think United need to just be calm in this window. If a good deal comes up, go and execute it. If Alaba comes up, sell the house, give every penny you've got to Bayern Munich and say, we want that player, because Alaba is a game changer.
World class, Rob.
Defensive midfield, centre back, fullback. He'll make the sandwiches. He'll make cups of tea. He'll do everything for Manchester United, and he'll make Manchester United a much better entity. They'll score more goals. They'll stop more goals, and they'll become title challengers in the blink of an eye. That's how good Alaba is. I get that people don't see that because they don't watch the Bundesliga or they're not aware of Alaba. Alaba's one of these players.
He's world class, Rob. He's world class in several positions.
He's gone under the radar forever, you know. And people talk about Alaba. I've talked to people over the past, and they go, "What does he kind of do? Does he do anything?" And you think, you know, there's a reason why Alaba's got tons of medals in his trophy cabinet. It's because he's really good, you know. So if you get Alaba at the age that he's at, and you say to him, and you can sell the Manchester United project to him, and say, "You're coming to Manchester United, and you're going to be the difference, and you're going to take United to the Premier League title, that's where we want to be, and you're that player," he might fancy it. He might go, yeah, I'm up for it. And, oh, what's that, 300 grand a week you want to pay me? Oh, yeah, okay, that sounds good as well. So there's all these kind of tick boxes exercises that players and clubs do. Yeah, if you can get him in January, go and get Alaba. But there is a chance that Alaba will just sign a new deal with Bayern Munich, carry on winning trophies in Germany, and will finish his career there. I do think, Rob, that
he's got the pick of every single club in the world. Real and Barca will want him. PSG, City, Chelsea are interested. Even Liverpool could want him. He has the pick. I'm not being a bit of a Debbie Downer here, but why would he choose Man United? Really?
Money. We pay more than most clubs. You mentioned Alexis Sanchez a minute ago. There's your example. You know, if you pay someone enough, they'll come, and they might regret it on the first day of training, like Alexis Sanchez said he did, but they might not. They might actually come and do the job. So overall, you know, yeah, you're right. Alaba has got the pick, and if he wants to say at his age, at 28, he wants to pay 5 years in Spain because that's his goal and his dream, then he'll accept 200 grand a week to go and play for Real Madrid or for Barcelona, and he'll kind of finish his career there, maybe help those big super giants. But Manchester United are also a super giant, you know, and the Premier League is still the biggest league in the world. There's no doubt about it. It's a much more attractive league now than it's ever been before because the money is still in the Premier League. There's no way that Real Madrid or Barcelona could compete with maybe the top 6 in England at the moment in terms of wages. They just can't. They haven't got the money. COVID has destroyed the Spanish economy even more than it has the English one. So these clubs in England have more money because they have backers and investors. And you're right. You know, you know, what would Alaba be looking for if it is a kind of dream ticket to kind of have a Madrid shirt on his chest for the foreseeable future? Then yeah, he'll go to one of those clubs and he'll accept 200 grand a week. However, if he wants 300 grand a week or 350 or 400 or even 450, he's coming to England. So United are in the mix. That's what that means. And Manchester United is still an attractive proposition for foreign talent. There's no doubt about it. You know, they can still attract a team. You know, look at Cavani. You know, even he's at the end of his career, Cavani could have gone anywhere. Cavani was a free agent, could have gone anywhere. He could have gone to Real Madrid. He could have gone to Barcelona. Barcelona might have picked him up and said,
Atletico were very interested.
We're losing Suarez. We're losing Suarez. Suarez is going to Atletico. So Cavani come and play for us. And he could have gone there. There's options for these players, you know, especially good players. United is still an attractive destination for all the top talent in the world. It's just that you have to make sure the deal is correct and that you're not bringing in just a mercenary. You're bringing in someone who wants to win. You need to basically go and let Bruno Fernandes go and do all your business because Bruno is at Man United to win. You know, he gets paid a good wage and he's going to get an even bigger deal now in the next few months. I'm sure they'll rip that contract up and give him the contract that he's worth because he's going to get a new set of figures, and no doubt about it. And he is the archetypal player that you want. Go and find a player that wants to win, that loves the idea of taking United back to the next level, and find that player. If it's not available in January, then hold off, wait. You know, you're still going to be in a good chance of getting top 4. You're probably not going to get ahead of Liverpool, even if you buy someone. You're probably not going to get ahead of City, even if you buy someone. So it's the same quest. Top 4 is where you want to be. And you need to go and win games. I think we've seen it with United. They've not played that well at times, but they're still winning games. You kind of go, oh, they should have won today. We're talking about United beating Leicester, and we say Leicester are a good team. So balancing points, nearly there, United. Go and find that key 1 or 2 players that take you over the line.
Just to add to that, Rob, that's actually where the progress is, because we're sitting here at the end of the game. We've drawn against a really good Leicester side who are obviously sitting at the top of the table with us. And we're saying we're disappointed. We feel like it's 2 points short. That's progress. And the second thing to do with the progress and the squad is that we brought Cavani off the bench 3-4 months ago. End of last season, we're bringing Igalo off the bench. That's progress for me. So that's a positive. I'm going to read out this question here, Rob. Do you think, it's quite a good question, we need a better systematic way of chance creation, i.e. Man City style cutbacks? I see this quite a lot. I see a lot of people ask, what is a Manchester United goal? You look at City, the cutbacks are something they do a lot. Liverpool like to cross it as well. Obviously, the out-to-in runs as well. What is a classic Man United goal? For me, I would say it's counter-attacking. The reason why United have such a good away record is because we're a fantastic counter-attacking side. So for me, if that's what we're going to talk about as a classic or systematic, you know, sort of style of play or United goal, it would be a counter-attacking goal.
Yeah, look, the truth is this. You know, when you're a football team who want to win trophies, you've got to score all types of goals. So I would like the classic Man United goal to be 5-yard tap-ins, because you know what? From 5 yards, you're more likely to score than miss. So if you can create and get the ball into the 6-yard box, and whether you have one striker that puts it away or maybe a late runner like a Van der Beek or someone like that coming in from deep, that's what I would like to see. What's a classic Man United goal? Well, of course, counter-attack. But United are really good at carving through teams with 2 or 3 passes with pace, but it's also much easier to defend against a more wide-ranging opponent who can just sit and play the low block and say, come on to us. Now, I don't want to see that with Man United. You're talking about the Man City system there. Now, City play that cutback. Why do they play that cutback? Well, it's because all their midfielders are geared towards being those kind of talents, aren't they? Edge of the box or just around there. Who am I? I'm Kevin De Bruyne. Give me the ball and I'll score. Oh, I'm Bernardo Silva. Yeah, Silva, give me the ball. I'll score. In the past, David Silva. That's what they do. You know, even Sterling maybe plays more as a striker. When they're on the front foot, he'll actually go and push himself towards beyond the penalty spot. So I don't think that's a classic Man City goal. What City do really well is that they'll hurt you in 10 different ways. Liverpool tend to hurt you in several different ways, you know, with their front three. They don't just do, they're not kind of just Johnny on the spot. Yeah, we do this and then we score a goal. They hurt you in different ways. That's what United need to become. And there is signs of that. There is signs of it today. So like we talk about the goal that we scored for the second, and Cavani was the striker. He dropped out. The false 9 took the striker's spot, made the channel run, took a touch, smashes it away, and United score a goal that's not very Manchester United. That's what we need to see more of. That's how you get higher up the table, because you can't read that. Leicester are looking at that and they're going, we didn't see that Cavani was going to drop out there. That's not something that we thought about. And that's how you need to beat opponents week to week to week, by doing different things and doing them well. And the only way to do that effectively, Haider, over 1, 2, 3 or 4 years is bring in different talent that can do different things. And that's,
I was going to say that.
That's
Rob.
why I'm happy about Van der Beek, because he's a different talent, and yeah, he's not getting minutes. But I can tell you, you know, as we go through this Christmas period, there'll be a game or 2 or 3 where you think, I just need a second runner now from deep. So what do? Do I play a diamond? Do I play Donny at the top of it? You know, what if Bruno gets injured? You need someone who can do something a little bit different. And United addressed that in the last transfer window. And there's still upside. Like, you know, I don't think Diallo's going to have an impact when he comes in because he's a boy, and Palestri's a boy. But they give you different options that if they get hot, you might be able to use them off the bench for 15, 20 minutes. That might be the difference between earning 6 or 7 or 8 points more a season. And that might be the difference between coming 3rd in the league and coming 6th. So those things do matter.
Also to add, Rob, United obviously looking at that young lad, Moises Caicedo. I did a podcast with Simon Edwards, who's a fantastic South American journalist. You've seen a little bit of him. What's your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I think he's the perfect kind of signing for United if the deal goes through. And it does look like the deal will go through. He's been hot for a little while in South America. He's been talked about in all sorts of terms about his upside and what he can do. There's this obvious comparison, because he mentioned it himself, about being kind of Kante Pogba hybrid, meaning that he can be that box-to-box player. However, defensively, he does all of the work that you want him to do, and that he can also score a goal. He knows what to do in those situations. He's a player that needs development. You know, if you buy him in January, does he change United? For me, probably not. But what you can do is you drop him into the system and you teach him, and you say, right, this is how we play. This is how Fred plays. This is how McTominay plays. And you see that guy over there, Paul Pogba, he's really good, but he's not going to be here in 6 months. So he's off. So we want you to kind of do some of the things that he does. That's how you teach and progress. There's no risk with signing a player like that. And United have got to get lucky with one of these players. You know, when you bring them in, if they've got all this upside, it's then up to you to develop. And he might be the player that United need, say, in a year, but you just get him in January because that's the way the market is. There's a big change in terms of Brexit with players coming in their age groups. So the permits are changing, and that means that Manchester United probably wouldn't want to do this deal till next summer. They'd like to see the player play more games. But because of the new laws in terms of work permits, they need to do this deal before really Brexit goes through and before the new laws come in. And that's why they're looking at him now at this moment. But I don't think he's a risk. You know, I think like with Palestri, they wanted him to stay there, but then they thought, right, let's bring him in-house and develop him and get him in the under-23s. This could be the same scenario with all these young players that Manchester United are signing.
Completely agree. And Reese says here, low risk and high reward signing. So, Rob, let's talk about the final word before we wrap up. What I'm going to say is that it's a positive. I'm sitting here thinking Man United should have won that game. And the fact I'm a little bit disappointed we didn't get the 3 points, because that shows how far we come. We've gone to a really good Leicester side, well drilled, some really brilliant players. And for me, we created the more clear-cut chances. And I think in the long run, it'll be a good point. But United are on the right path, progressing well, still in good form, didn't lose the game. We have quality change on the bench. So for me, positive, and then we move on to Wolves.
Yeah, you should never get too upset about a draw ever, unless that draw really messes you up in the running or something like that, where you need a victory and you just can't do it for whatever reason, then there's no real reason to kind of get too upset about it. Leicester are a good team. I think Leicester probably deserved a point out of all of it. Like we could say United edged it. Leicester maybe edged the first half, I think, in terms of possession. But not too upset about those things. It was more interesting for me today to see the tactics, to see the different roles that players were playing. You could have said before the game, if Ole was going to set up like that, he might have been tempted to play Telles, to say to Telles, go and stand on the halfway line and give me some more upside going forward. But I think, Ole was definitely very much aware of the space between the left-sided defender, being Shaw this week, and say giving him an outlet there for Harry Maguire, and that those two players just know each other a little bit more. There was one spell, I think, where Shaw plays a terrible back pass to De Gea, and De Gea clips it back out to Maguire, and then Maguire's all over the place because he's slow and he doesn't know what's going on, and then the ball comes out to Shaw again, and you just had your heart in your mouth just in that moment. That's why you actually play Luke Shaw, because they know each other a bit more. Telles might have made a mess of that situation, or Telles might have just turned and gone up the other end of the pitch of it. So I was more interested in those things today in terms of the selection. And I think Ole got it right, but the players didn't quite execute in those two moments for the goals. It's 2 points lost because United should have won it in 10 minutes to go. When you've got the lead, you're always in that scenario where you just need to lock up. But we do know that Manchester United are not particularly good at maybe closing out 5 minutes when they're in the lead. If it'd been the other way around and it had been 1-1 and United chasing it, or maybe United were losing 2-1, United would have chucked the kitchen sink at them and might have scored 4 goals because they're that kind of, they misrepresent.
Crazy
they misrepresent of what football needs to be at those kind of moments. They just kind of, they can be really hyper and just kind of, punish teams for that. But they didn't do that. They were trying to see it out and they didn't get it right. And they went to the 4-2-3-1 at that moment. They could have probably just gone to 5-4-1 at that moment with 6 minutes to go and just played 5-yard passes and really suffocated the game. That's the Man United I want to see in months to come. I want to see them learn to defend as a unit, but not forsake their attacking game for it. For 80 minutes, you can be a team that goes out to hurt the opponent. But for the last 10 minutes, if you're winning, shut the shop, close the doors, take the points and go home.
Completely agree with that, Rob. We will be back after the Wolves game. That is on the 29th, and that is a late kickoff at 8 p.m. So we'll be going live straight after, Rob. Thank you so much to all the listeners for listening. Thank you for joining me as usual, Rob. This is the Masterclass, the #1 Manchester United tactical podcast brought to you by Manscaped, and we will see you next time.